Climate change is moving faster than we are, but we don't give up because we know that climate action is the only path. I have long understood that climate change is not only an environmental issue, it is a humanitarian, economic, health, and justice issue as well. The water issue is critically related to climate change. People say that carbon is the currency of climate change. Water is the teeth. This pandemic has provided an opportunity to reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change. The effects of climate change are real and must be acted on. Climate change is the Everest of all problems, the thorniest challenge facing humankind. When you run a company, you want to hand it off in better shape than you found it. In the same way, just as we shouldn't leave our children or grandchildren with mountains of national debt and unsustainable entitlement programs, we shouldn't leave them with the economic and environmental costs of climate change. Climate change is not a discrete issue, it's a symptom of larger problems. Fundamentally, our society as currently designed has no future. We're chewing up the planet so fast, in so many different ways, that we could solve the climate problem tomorrow and still find that environmental collapse is imminent. We are all living together on a single planet, which is threatened by our own actions. And if you don't have some kind of global cooperation, nationalism is just not on the right level to tackle the problems, whether it's climate change or whether it's technological disruption. People are spending way too much time thinking about climate change, way too little thinking about AI. I want to use my position of leadership to help move along at a faster pace what I believe and know the Obama administration wants to do around the urgency of climate change. I hope that in future Congresses there will re-emerge a recognition that climate change is a reality, that our policies to meet our energy needs must also deal responsibly with environmental issues, including the damage caused by greenhouse gas emissions. As human beings, we are vulnerable to confusing the unprecedented with the improbable. In our everyday experience, if something has never happened before, we are generally safe in assuming it is not going to happen in the future. But the exceptions can kill you, and climate change is one of those exceptions. Doing all we can to combat climate change comes with numerous benefits, from reducing pollution and associated healthcare costs to strengthening and diversifying the economy by shifting to renewable energy, among other measures. To be clear, climate change is a true 800-pound gorilla in the room. The effects of global warming threaten global environmental upheaval over the coming century. But for South Florida and the Everglades, it could be our death knell if urgent action is not taken. The cost of our success is the exhaustion of natural resources, leading to energy crises, climate change, pollution, and the destruction of our habitat. If you exhaust natural resources, there will be nothing left for your children. If we continue in the same direction, humankind is headed for some frightful ordeals, if not extinction. I'm not afraid to spend money on the R&D that's really going to move us to a cleaner energy source that I think is so much the answer to the issues of environmental responsibility and climate change. We must act to reduce the increasingly dangerous and destructive levels of carbon pollution that account for practically all of global climate change. Climate change is the environmental challenge of this generation, and it is imperative that we act before it's too late. At first, when I heard about climate change, I was a climate denier. I didn't think it was happening, because if there really was an existential crisis like that would threaten our civilization, we wouldn't be focusing on anything else. That would be our first priority. So I didn't understand how that added up. Wind and other clean, renewable energy will help end our reliance on fossil fuels and combat the severe threat that climate change poses to humans and wildlife alike. I think there are more politicians in favor of electric cars than against. There are still some that are against, and I think the reasoning for that varies depending on the person, but in some cases, they just don't believe in climate change, they think oil will last forever. Climate change joined immigration, job creation, food safety, pilot training, veterans care, campaign finance, transportation security, labor law, mine safety, wildfire management, and scores of executive and judicial appointments on the list of matters that the world's greatest deliberative body is incapable of addressing. Climate change is a terrible problem, and it absolutely needs to be solved. It deserves to be a huge priority. We have to fight climate change like we actually want to win. Being told about the effects of climate change is an appeal to our reason and to our desire to bring about change. But to see that Africans are the hardest hit by climate change, even though they generate almost no greenhouse gas, is a glaring injustice, which also triggers anger and outrage over those who seek to ignore it. Saving our planet, lifting people out of poverty, advancing economic growth, these are one and the same fight. We must connect the dots between climate change, water scarcity, energy shortages, global health, food security and women's empowerment. Solutions to one problem must be solutions for all. Climate change isn't something people get to choose to believe or not, it's happening. I do think that climate change is real, and I think that it's something that we have to deal with, but I also think it has to be a balance. And, as governor of South Carolina, that was what I did. It's coming home to roost over the next 50 years or so. It's not just climate change, it's sheer space, places to grow food for this enormous horde. Either we limit our population growth or the natural world will do it for us, and the natural world is doing it for us right now. Taking proactive action on climate change is essential to ensuring that Unilever remains a viable business in the future. We will also reap the benefits in innovation, new product development, and cost efficiencies. There's something outrageously funny about the bold-faced lying that's going on, in a general way. Just the blatant denial of facts, whether it's climate change or crowd sizes. Every day, there's another blatant lie. I think there's comedy in there somewhere. Yet, despite our many advances, our environment is still threatened by a range of problems, including global climate change, energy dependence on unsustainable fossil fuels, and loss of biodiversity. The Environmental Protection Agency's first-ever limits on carbon pollution from power plants will create clean energy jobs, improve public health, bring greater reliability to our electric power grid, bolster our national security, demonstrate the United States' resolve to combat climate change and maybe even reduce our utility bills. Due to climate change, wildfires are growing in size, frequency, and intensity, and wildfire seasons are becoming longer. Public discourse has been polluted now for decades by corporate-funded disinformation, not just with climate change but with a host of health, environmental and societal threats. The implications for the planet are grim. Climate change, if unchecked, is an urgent threat to health, food supplies, biodiversity, and livelihoods across the globe. I believe global warming and climate change are real threats to our planet. Climate change is destroying our path to sustainability. Ours is a world of looming challenges and increasingly limited resources. Sustainable development offers the best chance to adjust our course. We should not only look at the short-term economic benefits of fossil fuels but also at the bad news for climate change. We should therefore not greet the fossil fuel age unconditionally. Climate change is not just about carbon dioxide levels and melting polar ice caps. It is about our public health and protecting our Earth for future generations. Taking bold action on climate change simply makes good business sense. It's also the right thing to do for people and the planet. Setting a net-zero GHG emissions target by 2050 will drive innovation, grow jobs, build prosperity, and secure a better world for what will soon be 9 billion people. Climate change knows no borders. It will not stop before the Pacific Islands, and the whole of the international community here has to shoulder a responsibility to bring about a sustainable development. On almost every environmental issue I care about, in fact, I've been wrong at one point or another. I used to think that climate change was no big deal, that most environmental problems were massive exaggerations, that oil reserves were effectively unlimited, and more. Change or be changed, right? And what we mean by that is that climate change, if we don't change course, if we don't change our political and economic system, is going to change everything about our physical world. Climate change is sometimes misunderstood as being about changes in the weather. In reality, it is about changes in our very way of life. Humans should be the Earth's custodians, not its butchers. Much attention, though not enough, focuses on the existential threat posed by climate change. But humanity's mass destruction of the Earth's wildlife is all too little discussed. The direct risks from climate change are obvious, as changing weather patterns cause extremes of flood and drought, hurricanes, and typhoons. These damage the physical infrastructure of buildings and bridges, roads and railways. They are violent and disruptive. We have to have a planet to pass on to the next generation, and these issues of climate change and climate justice and the disproportionate burdens that communities of color actually bear from our damaging climate, is a huge issue. When all the world appears to be in a tumult, and nature itself is feeling the assault of climate change, the seasons retain their essential rhythm. Yes, fall gives us a premonition of winter, but then, winter will be forced to relent, once again, to the new beginnings of soft greens, longer light, and the sweet air of spring. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.